Welcome to Shane East Meets, which is a special series from the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, where I, Shane East, get to meet some of your favourite people from the romance arena of audiobooks. We hope you love this episode, and of course, the Audiobook Lovin Podcast is brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. Now, today, my guest is the one and only, the world famous, never to be replicated by anyone else, Emma Wilder, a wonderful and renowned narrator. Hello, how are you?
Oh my God, what an introduction. I don't think I can live up to that. I'm sorry. We'll have to stop. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Don't stop. But please give me more praise anytime you want, but that's ridiculous. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. No, it's lovely to have you. You're my second ever narrator guest on
Oh,
this.
well,
Well,
second
no, but I will say,
second best. I
no,
got it.
no,
Message received. Yeah.
but you're you're the last one of the year, so I'm saving the best for last.
Oh, well,
You get where
nice.
I'm
Nicely
going.
done.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. I
Who
mean,
was the first?
well, Joe, obviously.
Oh,
So, I mean,
okay.
let's not even go there. That was traumatic
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
all
Oh,
fronts.
really? Was that hard? Was that hard for you?
No, he's great to talk to, but Joe and
He's
I
high
have a
energy.
frenemy. We have a
I
frenemy
know.
relationship, so I can't really say too many good things about him in one sentence.
You'd
Otherwise, it
lose
just
your
ruins the whole thing.
rep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
You
Our whole
you you
dynamics
don't want
off.
him to get a big head.
No, I think that
Big
ship sailed.
grr. Yeah.
But anyway, enough enough about him. This is about you. How are you? How are you doing? First off, how's 2020 treating you?
Oh, amazing. What a great year. Like, just so many dreams. Like, it's just like doing so much fun stuff, seeing so many people, going new places. Um, it's terrible, but it's fine, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm really lucky in that I'm able to work. I'm still with that guy you met at the Audis, so that's
Oh,
really nice.
lovely.
Um,
You've survived
so
the pandemic.
yeah, I would say the pandemic has strengthened us,
Oh,
so that's
yeah.
nice. Um, so I'm not totally alone, because otherwise living alone, as you know, it's weird right now. Um,
Yeah. Living
but yeah,
alone,
like,
working alone.
yeah, it's
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 quite a
not
lot.
great, right? It's it's not great for your mental health. But so having someone I can see is really wonderful, and having enough work is wonderful, and
Mm,
I'm healthy, but like everything else blows. Like
I know.
it's like just
Well,
I don't
what's it
know.
like in New York? Because I mean, I'm in LA, so it's a certain
Yeah.
thing, but New York's a very different city, and I
Um,
wonder with my friends there.
yeah, I mean, it's like when you go outside, it feels normal, except that everyone's wearing masks and a lot of things are closed.
Mm,
I mean, I'm in Brooklyn. I don't go into Manhattan very often. I don't leave my neighborhood very often.
hmm
So it feels like every day is a weird holiday when the city is empty.
Yeah.
But it's not like scary. Like
hmm
I think the news portrays New York in a certain way, particularly certain channels. And it's not like even during the protests, it was fine. Like it was just sort of inspiring.
Mm,
But now it's just kind of tense again because COVID cases are rising. But I don't know.
yeah.
It's just lonely and weird, but people are doing their best, I guess.
Keeping calm and carrying on, I guess, stiff upper lip, as the Brits would say.
Yeah, we're not great about the stiff upper lip thing in New York. More loud. Yeah.
This fucking blows.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Um, but it's fine. I would love to
Yeah.
not be in the city anymore. I'm so
Oh. Well, I
done with
wondered
it.
because, well, also because, like, NYC, I've stayed there before, sort of months at a time, and it's been, the whole thing of NYC is that it's very bustling and busy, and people are out and about, and so I kind of wondered about that. And now, obviously, it's getting colder, so then it's sort of LA.
Yeah.
We can do outdoor dining probably through the winter,
Yeah.
but I
I
was like,
mean,
how's that going to work there?
that's the plan here with like heaters, I
Heat
guess.
lamps.
um, but yeah, it feels like the good parts of New York are either asleep or dead, and the bad parts are all still here. So
Mm.
I'm fantasizing about the Hudson Valley, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah, yeah,
see.
yeah. Who knows? Who knows? But, you know, until this all clears up, we'll keep carrying on, as you say. As you say,
One day at a time. Yeah.
exactly. Now, on to other stuff, onto your career as a prolific narrator,
Oh
which you are
my
at this
gosh.
point. You've got I
I
don't know how many
guess.
titles, but it's the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah,
Uh,
hundreds. I don't know
yeah.
about and hundreds, but certainly hundreds.
Well, definitely, you've must have done like 2, 3, 400 at this point. I know you
Probably almost 3, I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Someone will comment on this podcast and tell us exactly how many down
But
to
it
the second.
over both names that I record under. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I think I
So
looked up
someone
your I think I looked up Emma, and it was like, in the
it's like,
100 and something.
yeah, 100 and
Um,
change.
yeah,
Yeah,
which
that
is
sounds
similar to
right.
me. So it's prolific in my book. Now, what would you say here's a weird question, but what would you say to your young romance narrator self, if you could go back to the beginning before you
Ooh,
got to this point, you know, as you were setting off?
like, what's something I wish I'd learned sooner?
Yeah, like
Or
if you had advice or something, you know, for your young self starting off,
huh,
in romance particularly.
in romance particularly. I don't know. I mean, I think I did okay shaping this particular part of my career. I don't know if there's, like, things that I mean, there's some things that in the beginning it took me a little while to figure out, like and actually, I'd be interested to know if this is true for you too. Like, when I started, I was giving every sentence, like, a lot of weight and meaning in the way that I might do for literary fiction, and, like, that is no good.
Mhm.
You know? Like, romance contemporary romance anyway, like,
Mm,
requires a really different, like, breezier, more connected and intimate read where you're like, "This is what I was reading every sentence, but I'm just kinda telling you how I feel about it as I go, and it's
yep.
just all flowing out of my mouth." Yeah, so I think I would have given myself a little, like, acting coaching early on
Uh-huh.
in terms of tone, but I don't know, there's some things that I feel pretty good about, like, I figured out fairly quickly what types of storylines are great for someone else, but, like, I'm not comfortable with, like, where the lines of my comfort are and have been pretty good about sticking to that.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know.
Yeah, I
What
think you're on the same lines as what I, you know, was thinking when I was, you know, thinking about the question. It is the same. I just the tone of it. I would go back and tell my earlier self about pacing, maybe, and you know, things don't need to be as heavy and drawn out as I was so used to doing in other types of books. And I worked at Random House, so
totally.
like, and they have a certain style, and you really had to
You do you
feel
think
every
so?
word.
What do you think their style is?
They're definitely a lot slower. They're
Yeah,
definitely and I mean, I'm not talking about, like, treacle, but it's, like, in comparison, 'cause, whenever I
yeah.
work with them now, they're always like, "Okay, let's just take we can take that pace down," like, 'cause I'm straight into, like, being chatty and,
Right.
exactly kind of contemporary romance sort of vibe.
Just, like, flowy, yeah, and
Yeah,
they're like, "Let's
they're a
give
lot
this little
more
breathing room."
each word we
Yeah.
need to hear each word exactly, and I was like,
Oh,
"Okay,
interesting.
that doesn't, not necessarily romance, it's a lot more conversational," and I used to sweat the voices too much. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
in contemporary romance and you know, because I did a lot of YA, so I did all sort of creatures and all of this
I
and
know,
everything,
yeah,
and so I always felt like and everyone had to sound really different.
and really
Whereas
distinct, right?
yes,
Yeah.
so you could latch onto them immediately. Whereas romance, I
And
was
that
like, she
I
doesn't
think
need to.
that's helpful if there's, like, 4 guys in the band and, like, one's the asshole and, like, one's the fun guy. Like, you wanna be able to tell who's talking when you have those big scenes, but it's not like you have to do, like, troll and elf voices. And you're like, "Why,
Unless he's
that's the
really
old
fucking ugly.
necromancer coming back from chapter 2." That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Although, I worry I mean, you don't have to deal with this, but, like, the whole male voice for female narrators thing is, like, a big deal, and people really care about it. And sometimes I get like, I'm really grateful for all of the, um, sort of, like, I don't know, appreciation I get for that part of what I do, but it makes me
Mhm.
really self-conscious about it sometimes because, like, some days, your voice is different every day because you're a living, breathing organism and whatever. And so some days I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, is it deep enough for them today? Like, is this enough? Like, do I need a stretch or like, so I do get sort of in my head about that particular element of the voices,
I think
but the
that
others too.
ties in with what I was saying, that I would tell I'd tell myself not to sweat it so much. Like, and that kind of encompasses that too. Because I reckon, I mean, I'm not with you in the booth, but I know your work really well. But I reckon that one day that you feel that, "Oh, is that quiet in the," I don't know, because I feel the same. Is my voice quiet? And then
Right.
I listen back and it's like, there is really no discernible
No
difference.
one can
It's all in
fucking
my
tell.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I've done that where I've been like, "Oh my god, I was so off for chapters like 3 and 4. I just felt terrible that day. I'm gonna go back and redo them." So I take like an extra 2 hours and then I listen to them in comparison to the originals and like not only do they not sound different, like the originals are better. Like I shouldn't have
Generally,
tried
yeah.
so hard. Yeah, it's just like threw away a day for no reason. Um yeah, and I used to like when I will produce my own stuff, I'll tell my editor like I felt like I had a cold this day cuz like she's a friend and I can show my vulnerable,
Mhm.
nervous, raw artist self to her. I'll be like, "I think I had a cold. I think I sound terrible. If I sound terrible, just tell me. I'll redo it." And she'll be like, "I couldn't even fucking tell. That's how you always sound." I thank you. I
I know,
think.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What yeah, there you go. There's the answer to the younger self for sure, which is really
Yeah.
fits in with my as well. Just don't fucking
Sort of
sweat
a
it as much. It's gonna
let it
be
go.
great.
Yeah.
Now moving on from that, how did you feel? I think I asked Joe this as well. How did you feel when you first vocally started having relations? This is the British way of saying it. Having relations with oneself vocally.
Uh-huh.
Uh, how did that
That
feel?
is that
Nothing.
sounds so much weirder and dirtier than what you're actually trying to say. Um, you mean reading sex scenes out loud?
Yeah, playing both
Ah,
parts.
oh, okay. Um, orally fucking myself. Orally.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the one.
but fine. It's so much easier than doing it with a dude in the booth. In real
Duet
life
style.
in real life, it's fine. Yeah. That has its own set of challenges. But yes, duet st like, with Joe, we did some texts duet for one of Jessica Peterson's books. And like, I did one of Lauren Blakely's books with Jason Clark, where we were both in the studio together.
Mm.
And like that is weird. Like that is so comfortable. Like you just go for it. You've done duet before. You just go for it. But
Yes.
then afterwards you're like, ooh, okay. Well, um, doing it just on my own feels totally not
Yeah,
as weird as maybe it should. I don't know. Like, just because it's not really me doing me. It's like you're just playing out a movie in your head and
totally.
saying all the parts, you know?
Well, when you put it into context against doing it in person, uh, it's very true. Because I think one of my first experiences with duet was with Ava Erickson in a studio together. Because that was how
Oh,
we
yeah.
before the whole Zoom revolution, I feel, when people were doing
Sure.
duets a few years back, it was you had to get everyone in the studio together.
And I
Um,
mean, like we did for Lauren Blakely's multicasts
oh,
too, but
yeah, for
I hope it goes
instant
back to that because apart from the sex parts, that's so much better.
yes.
Like, you know.
It is better, except when you have the sex scene, and when my first one with Ava Erickson was, putting suddenly out of nowhere in this P&R thing, I grabbed a silver implement and shoved it up her her butt
Or what? Yeah.
her butt, and we
Uh-huh.
kinda had to both stop and just laugh out loud because we were like, where did that come from? Like, we're fighting demons and this and that, and then suddenly that
Right.
comes out? Like, I don't know, it's
Also,
funny.
yeah, I feel like that's something it's best to ask if your partner's into before you just go for it. Like, sometimes it's better to prep a
Yeah.
little, I would even say. Um, that's funny. Yeah, she's fun. She's so funny. She's so, like, straightforward and, like, no bullshit, though. I feel like she'd be
Yes.
a good person to do that with.
Yeah, we had a
But
laugh. It was very
yeah.
dry about the whole thing, and then we're like, "Okay, well, back to that
Yep.
then."
It's
Um,
11. Yeah.
it's a living. I should get that on a T-shirt. Um, and now here's one other fun little question before I dive into other stuff, which is a little bit heavier, like more weighty about you and
Okay.
your career. On a scale of saying the words cock and pussy in a lifetime quota as a percentage, where are you at this point? Like, as a normal person,
80.
like, if you were
Oh, in my
to
in my actual life or
say
in the
taking
booth?
Emma like, taking Emma and, like, how your life in general, how you maybe say those words, like, where have
Yeah,
you
I mean,
exceeded your quota already? Are you at 1,000%?
oh, I mean, I d so in real life, I don't really say pussy very often.
What do you mean?
Um,
Why
I do
wouldn't you
do
throw that into conversation left, right, and center?
um, I mean, so I feel like my quota for that is low and,
Right.
but on it doesn't I don't know, I've got some more I was just gonna say, I've got a few more cocks in me, but I feel like that's not what I meant.
Someone will take that out of this, and you know that's gonna appear somewhere else.
Yep. Well, you know, it is
I asked the question because sometimes I think, "God, I've said the" I was thinking about your question, I was like, "I've said these words so many more times than I would
yeah,
ever
thousands
have
and
said
thousands of
them in my
times.
life." Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I feel like my quota as a person, I've used up mine and, my whole neighborhoods at this point,
Well, I
which is
hope
not a bad
you'll
thing.
go around and knock on doors and let them know. Sorry, just wanted to inform you.
I've also used your quota of cock and pussy,
Right.
at which point I get arrested, so maybe I'm
Fair.
not.
Yeah.
I don't really know my neighbors, I will say, in LA. I don't know
Oh,
about New
really?
York. New York, I feel you don't know your neighbors either.
I
I
mean, I
know the guy
know
next door who grows weed,
some
but
of
that's it.
them. Why do you know him, Shane?
Oh, because my porch is kind of like
Oh,
he's always watering.
not because you're not because you're a
Going
customer.
no. But he's grown because it's legal here, like, grown these huge plants. I've seen them
It's a
grow from little things to
it's
massive
legal
ones.
for personal use? Or does
Yeah,
he work for a dispensary
I think it's legal. Well, whatever he does, it's legal for
out in
personal use
public?
here.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
interesting.
Find my address, find
I
him.
I know a couple of my neighbors. I don't know, my building's so dumpy. Uh, I feel like I know
Don't
them.
spoil the illusion. You live in a penthouse. You
Well, I
record
do
all
live on
day.
the top floor, yeah.
There you go.
Um, but I know them because 'cause I'll, like, go out in the hall barefoot in my pajamas to be like, "What the fuck is that?" And someone else will be like, "I know, it's been going off for 2 hours." And, like, that's how I know who my neighbors are.
That's how you
Um,
connect.
mhm. Mhm.
Not, "Can I borrow a cup of sugar?" in the
Right,
old-fashioned
no,
way.
I called the police already and they haven't come. Yeah. It's it's, uh
I love New
it's an
York. I love the
adventure
style.
every
It's
day.
great. So now moving away from that and moving into something, else, no, it's a complete 180 really.
Okay.
Shakespeare.
You mean the equivalent of shoving a silver implement up
It's
someone's butt
completely the
mid-fight?
other way. Who kno actually, he may have done this in his own way. I was gonna talk about Shakespeare, and
Okay.
you having studied Shakespeare, which I
I
know
do. I have
you have.
actually, like,
You
pretty
do study, you
extensive
continue?
experience. No, no, no. But, I, like, certainly studied it in school, and then I did a one-year acting fellowship at the Shakespeare Theater in DC, and then I went back and did a show at the Folger Shakespeare Theater in DC. Of like, it was a big percentage of the stage acting work I did.
Was that when you is that how you kind of introed into stage acting? You started in Shakespeare?
No, um, I mean, I did some Shakespeare like in college, but I also did other stuff. And then I went to a conservatory after I graduated from undergrad. And then I don't know, Shakespeare was just like the jobs that I got, and then got more of those because I'd gotten the first ones. You just get in
Mhm.
little ruts.
And what
Um,
and you loved it, or how did you move away
yeah,
from it? Or
I
was it
love
just
it.
'cause theater
Well, I
doesn't
mean,
pay a
doesn't
living?
pay, and there's no roles for women over, between the ages of 18 and 60. So it's just like, I think you can kind of, or not right now, obviously, but you could kind of scrape together a living as a regional theater actor doing mostly Shakespeare if you were a dude, because there's
Mhm.
always plenty of parts for dudes in all those plays. And so you can go to DC and you can go to Ashland in Oregon. Like every city has like places like that. But for women, there's just like not a lot there. Like the last thing I did was at the Folger Shakespeare Theater in DC, which was The Taming of the Shrew. and I was Bianca. And like that play, I mean, that's sort of like a problem play, but parts of it are great. But like Bianca is not a exciting part. She's just the good sister. And like
Right.
I love being in a show, and I like that's why I love romance narration, because I feel like we have this, like you and I and like all the other people who do this a lot are sort of like in the same club. Do you know what I mean? Like we have each other to lean on and talk about it with, and it feels a little bit like being part of a cast.
Hmm.
Um, but I loved that about acting, but it just like didn't happen enough for it to make sense as a job.
Yeah, it doesn't always deliver on the expectations. I
No,
feel
it
like
doesn't.
acting
Yeah,
in front of the camera
those
or on
magical
stage.
moments that led you to fall in love with it come like maybe a
Yeah.
few times a year if you're lucky. Yeah.
You used to bring me presents and now you don't. It's like a relationship that's gone bad. It's like, okay, well, I need to get out of this now. Uh,
Yeah.
or just move to another angle. Like I'm totally the same as you, and moved into voice far more and loved it and love all many reasons that some of which you just touched on. But before I move off from Shakespeare, what was the role then? If Bianca wasn't so exciting, what was the role that you wanted to do or did do? I don't know if you
Did
ever
do,
got to do it.
yeah. I mean, I got to do a bunch of them. I don't know. I mean, Kate is a fun role in Taming of the Shrew, but then the end is like, as a feminist, troubling to me. And you can do the
Mhm.
play. How familiar are you with that play, The Taming of
Not
the Shrew?
massively. It's been a
So
long
like
time since.
she's the town bitch, and he comes in and tames her, and
Right.
like then she's tame. And so like you can do an interesting production of it where it's like she's kind of a bitch, but she's also kind of misunderstood, and then they kind of fall in love. But in order to make the end anything other than like, and now she's in a 24/7 DS relationship that she didn't want to be in for the rest of her life, like you have to sort of, uh, you know, add some trick to it, or be like, kind of show them off on the side of the stage, like as if they're in it together and this is part of their plan. Like you have to
Uh-huh.
fudge it, because as it is, it's not really satisfying. It's like pretty
Gotcha.
depressing.
Okay.
I don't know. Rosalind and As You Like It was pretty fun. I understudied that, but didn't play it.
Uh-huh. What about, I mean,
Oh,
I feel like Lady Macbeth's always one people talk about, but I don't
yeah,
even know if
I
that
would love to do that. I never
that's, I
did.
mean, yeah, I feel like that's an older woman's
Well,
role, right?
it can be. It's not always. I
Oh.
don't know if you know this, but a lot of men marry younger women. So
What?
I know
Never
it's
seen
extreme.
that.
Yeah, it's disgusting. But uh, so there are some younger Lady Macbeths.
Oh,
But I don't know.
yeah.
I'm
I
edging
think
up
I'm just
into.
thinking of Judi Dench because I think that's the only one I've seen. So she
Oh
sort of
yeah,
did every Shakespeare
she's
role, even though she was
right.
already like 60. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's probably a little older than Lady Macbeth is generally, but she
Yeah,
can get away with it.
she
You
can pretty
you
much do
can do whatever
anything.
she wants. Yeah.
So I just bring it up because, you know, I know people like, hasn't Joe done some Shakespeare in some romance books?
He wrapped some Shakespeare in, I believe.
Wasn't that Instant
Yeah,
No, was that
yeah, yeah,
Instant
yeah.
I remember him rapping and I was very impressed. God, I hate Lady
Yeah,
Macbeth fans.
wasn't it? I wasn't in that scene, so I was like
I was
doing something
there.
else.
He was there. I
Yeah.
was like, I was quite, yeah, I was quite surprised.
If that
I
happened in
couldn't do
real
that.
life when you were there, though, it was definitely instant gratification.
Yeah, I remember him rapping something. I don't remember it being Shakespeare, so that's just me being probably dead at the end of the day. Like, I was just mesmerized by how, like, the rhythm and what he was
Oh,
doing.
no. I think it must have been Shakespeare, because I think it was that sonnet that, like, I have had to read at weddings. It's the
Yes.
sonnet, like,
Oh, yeah,
let
yeah,
me
yeah,
not
yeah,
to the
yes.
marriage of true minds admit impediment, or whatever it is.
Right. Yes,
Um,
yes,
that's
indeed.
like the wedding sonnet.
Right. Although I will say, because I'm British, Shakespeare just sounds like regular English to me. So it's
Yeah.
obviously, it does not. FYI, if anyone thinks I'm being an arrogant asshole, it really doesn't.
And then he did What I'm Looking For by Karen Gray, narrated by Karen White and Joe Arden.
Right. So he did what? So that was the second book. And what was the Shakespeare connection?
In it, he plays an actor who's doing Shakespeare, and he says a lot of Shakespeare, and people
Okay.
dug it. But yeah, he's gotten to do a bunch, but I'm sort of jealous, because I think I told you this, because I want to do more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why you know, any authors listening, feel
right.
free
I'm
to throw
pro
Emma's way.
Shakespeare. I can
Yeah,
handle it. I can handle that
more
dense
than handle it.
text. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yes.
So, okay, so now we've covered Shakespeare. A couple of like career questions. Um, is there a particular like breakout series or book you did that people suddenly started to take notice and then they're like, oh, who's Emma? And then it all started to kind of snowball began, I would say.
I mean, honestly, I think, well,
You can be
I
low
don't
and
know.
slow. You could just be like a slow burn that like turned into an inferno.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there were a couple books that people liked, like Tegan Hunter's Let's Get Textual, people really liked. And then
Mhm.
I narrated all of Rosalind James's, not all of them, someone else started one of the series, but her Escape to New Zealand books that people liked. But I honestly think sparked a sort of the roller coaster ride I've been on the last couple of years is Lauren Blakely hearing me on a Kay Bromberg book I did for Audible with, I think, Jason Clark, and liking me, and then just like she started saying really nice things about me
Mhm.
on the internet, and then that made a huge difference.
Right.
I think it's her fault, frankly.
She is to blame for
Yeah.
for the world phenomenon that is Emma Wilder. I agree. I think it's kind of a similar trajectory for a bunch of us. You sort of have done a
Is that
bunch
what
of
happened?
stuff.
Yeah. Was there, do you feel like there was a series for you that
I
was
don't
like your
know.
breakout thing?
I'd done some, and then but I never really took it. I never really focused on it at the beginning. It was just sort of an
Yeah.
aside thing that someone asked me, and I was like, "Sure," one of the publishers. And then I guess, yeah, I can't really pinpoint either, but I do think things had already the ball was rolling pretty well, and then somehow I can't quite remember. Someone will probably point out to me that there was some. I mean, some authors that I've done that uh, they garner a lot more attention. But Lauren is very vocal, so and she has a lot of
Yeah.
attention. So I agree. It's sort of I think instant gratification then put it
It's a
into
big deal.
another
Yeah.
situation, and then
Because not only is she very vocal on the internet, but like all the authors are friends with each other.
yeah.
So if one of them's like, you know, who is great and did a good job for me, then suddenly you get a bunch more jobs.
Yeah, and I think it kind of all comes together because I think maybe I was already working for Louise Bay, and then
She's a big deal.
she's a
Yeah.
big deal, and then I realized that down the line. I was like, I'd mentioned her. She's like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "Oh, you guys all chat together behind the scenes.
Well,
Everyone's
it's
having a
like
conversation."
us, right?
Yeah,
Like,
for
yeah.
sure. So I think, yeah, you kind of get integrated, and then suddenly it's thing, and then the next thing, you're in a box 24/7 making love to
Right.
yourself.
And
But it's
someone's
great.
tweeting about your
Someone's
male voice. Yeah.
Well, that brings me on to the next question, which was because I asked people on Twitter, I'm sure you saw,
Oh,
if
yeah,
they
I
had
saw
any
that too. I
questions,
didn't necessarily
and
look at all that.
there were,
I
it
wanted
can
it
be
to
a
be
bit of a
fresh. Yeah, I
oh,
didn't wanna,
yeah.
like, do my homework before.
Well, a lot of people mentioned your accents, and they also mentioned your male voice. Those were kind of the
Ah,
2 themes that kept cropping up. So and I agree. When
it
I
really
got
turns you on when you listen to
the
my books. You just
yeah, your
can't keep it
male
together.
voice.
Yeah.
Sweet Jesus. Um, I'd call it the dog's bollocks as we do in back
Oh,
home.
hot. That is so
Yeah. Do you
hot.
like that? Have you heard that before? You must have. You're very
No,
Anglophile.
I
Oh,
haven't, but I mean, I've certain like, I mean, it's like the cat's pajamas or something else that makes no sense and isn't a good
yeah.
thing that is, I mean, does
You just wouldn't say
that
that to
doesn't,
kids though, dog's bollocks.
right,
Probably.
because it means testicles. I mean, I know that. I'm not a fool.
I
Uh,
just wanna make sure because 'cause you're like, "It's like the cat's pajamas." I was like,
oh yeah, it's
"Wow,
just like the cat's
different
pajamas
demographic."
or like, see you later, alligator, just little things kids say.
But your male voice is the dog's bollocks, I would say, and
Oh,
taking aside any
well,
sort of,
thank you.
any days you have where you might be questioning it, um,
I might be
is
questioning a lot of things.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, as we all do. Um, like, is there a way that did you just find that? I mean, you have, like and we've had this
It's just
discussion
my
before, you
voice.
have a huskier
Yeah.
voice, which
Yeah.
for me means, but, like, a little rasp to it,
Yeah.
um,
And to
uh,
me means boys shopping in the big
means
and tall section at
chunky
TJ
guys,
Maxx.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's dated. Like, I think I grew up reading too many books written in the 50s where, like, that's a word that gets used for boys, and like that nobody. First of all, talking about the weight of children is no longer
Yeah.
like a really great idea for anybody.
Hmm.
It's sort of been accepted that that's not helpful. But I think that term has kind of fallen out of favor.
Yeah, I wouldn't call
But
another
yes,
bloke
I have a
husky.
husky
I'd just say
voice.
he's kind of, you know, big fella.
No, it's just my voice.
Oh, so it just kind of was easy for you because
Yeah,
I've had some, like, I've taught people. I sometimes teach people, I think,
yeah.
as you do, um, and that was one thing that came up and sort of, so for me, obviously, it's different. It's like the opposite. It's like trying to find the right
Right.
female voice, but yeah, I didn't know if there was like a knack or something, or it's just kind of easy,
No.
kind of something.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, the things that you do are you sort of like relax your throat and like kind of like go a little flatter and lower, but then like you just have to go with whatever's there. Like if it's
Yes.
only this high, then like that's what your male voice is. Like if it's down here, great. Like you can't push it low. Pushing it lower just sounds ridiculous. Like then you sound like
Like
you're
you're not
choking
well.
or constipated. Yeah, like it just um but like you just have to sort of like
Yeah.
let everything relax and just go into your chest and like
Yeah.
only chest resonance. And then what you have is what you have,
I
you
guess
know?
it was just part of the universe sort of just saying, "This
Yeah,
is where you're meant to
guiding me
be,
toward this.
Emma."
Yeah.
Um,
With your deep resonant chest, Emma. This is what you
well,
should
you
be
have a very
doing.
it's interesting 'cause you have a very feminine voice, like,
Well,
but
I
there
don't know
is
that I'd
that,
say
like,
very
smokiness to it.
feminine.
Uh,
Yeah,
Not like girly, I just mean it's
right.
distinctly feminine, it's not,
Like I don't
it's
sound
not
like a guy
yeah,
when I'm talking to you, just regular.
you don't sound like Kathleen Turner, you know what I mean? Like, there are some
Right.
there are some actors that you can like, I have a very what's her name? Is it Bea Arthur? Yeah, before she
Well,
passed
she
away.
was also quite elderly by the
Yes,
time we
but
were all
I
listening. I
always
mean,
know her as that, as, like, she had a real deep voice, like, I would say yours just has that smokiness to it, but then
yeah,
the ability to drop into a very low register is just very easy for you on
I
top of
think
that.
I
So you're
think
lucky, it's a gift is what I'm saying. It's a really
thank
true
you. I mean,
thing.
but I do think part of it is like how you choose to present yourself to the world, which is some like for men it's the same but different in that I feel like at some point in middle school you start looking at your handwriting and listening to how you're talking and being like, I
Mhm,
wonder if people would like me better and take me more seriously or think I was cooler or whatever if I sounded like this, or if my
mhm,
handwriting you just start adjusting things about yourself based on what you think other people want to hear. And
mhm,
so many women, like, I feel like at some point I started kind of talking a little bit more like, this isn't actually where my voice would like to sit. Like,
mm,
where my voice really sits is like here. But I think to be taken more seriously, I kind of pushed it down a little. And as I've gotten
interesting.
older, I've gotten better at, and men do that hugely, right? Like,
Yes.
you think about what sounds, if like I have a couple gay friends who sound obviously gay. And it's not because their voices are magically gay, it's because they're not trying to sound like alpha.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
They're just like going and letting it be whatever it is. And so like we all shape our voices consciously or unconsciously based on what we think is expected of us. And I think I spent a little too much time trying to be taken seriously as a smart person and then
Mm.
getting older and then also doing romance like I had to kind of let the women be a little higher and to differentiate it, right? Because
Right.
if my women are here, then like where do my
Yeah.
men have to be? like
Huge
yeah.
balls.
So I think it's all sort of like learning your instrument and shedding the ways you've been kind of like tweaking it where you don't need to and then seeing what you
Yeah.
have.
I know what you're talking about, and that kind of well, I don't know if the word tribalism, but, like you say about I think as you grow up, you're trying to fit into a group,
Yeah.
and sometimes
I
for
mean,
blokes that is like
with cultural stuff, it's like called code switching a lot, right? Like where you're like, no, I'm with my bros and I talk like this, but like
yes,
at home I might talk like that.
yeah,
Um, I think about that a lot with accent stuff for British stuff because with American I just know what it all is. But with British, if it's like, well, he's a guy and he's actually really rich, but he wants people to think he's cool, so he like actually has a bit more MLE, like like London multicultural London English or whatever that like sort of
I've
Ali
never even heard
G-ish.
that.
Yeah, but that's because you don't need to think about it because it's just there. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's like trying to loosen up and sound a little more lower class and street to be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think having done this job, especially books, and you listen so much to your own voice, because other voiceover work,
Mm,
it's like lines here and there and characters or, commercial stuff is just a tagline. But when you listen permanently to your voice, um, I think you do kind of ask a lot of those questions. And I would say similar in that my voice rounded out more because I think
mm,
I had a propensity to just, like you said, maybe I don't know if it was consciously or subconsciously, but be kind of a lot flatter and just very kind of down here. Uh, and then when I'd work, it's sort of, I realized, I had to open up avenues of my voice and
yeah.
not try to sound, like you say, a
Like a
certain
serious
way.
grown-up man.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Like, yeah,
yeah.
like this kind of
You're
thing.
like,
And I
"Now I
realized I was doing that. I
am a
was like,
serious grown-up man, and I can sound how I sound." Yeah.
yeah. And my voice actually just sounds a lot better,
Yeah, and
rounded
freer,
out.
I would say, right? Like, like,
Yeah.
freer and more expressive and more complete.
And as you say, it sort of allows you, like, I had to, and some of it was just a technical thing. It just allowed me having to do all these different voices. I opened up my voice in general. So it became a
Yeah,
better rounded voice because I had to go up here for kids or for, my female voice was higher, then lower and all of that stuff. So yeah. So that's an interesting answer. But you touched on accents, because that
yeah,
is the other thing that came up. So you are very good at them. I don't know. The one question I have for myself is how the fuck did you get adept at kind of obscure ones? To me, obscure. Like, I can't
yeah.
do a New Zealand accent. I
Yeah,
don't really
but
know
yeah,
the
I
difference
know we've
between
talked
that and
about it, but,
Australia.
like, you could if you just, like
I
like
haven't applied myself, you are right.
yes, yes,
I
you're
just go to Australian.
yeah,
But
your
how
report
did you
card
as an
says,
American
"Shane has a lot of potential." Uh, uh, I mean, so in acting school, you learn or at the one I went to, right? I had, like, 2 years of voice and speech, and in speech, you learn, like, the building blocks of accents, right? Like phonemes, like the International Phonetic Alphabet. So,
Yep.
like, you learn how to write things out in sounds, and
Mhm.
then when you're looking at, you know, um, different accents, you're looking at what are the sound changes, and then on the paper, you could, like, erase the E's the way they were, or the S sound and put in whatever it is for this new thing.
My God, you're
So
such a good student. I was supposed to learn to do all that, and I never did properly until I did
I wa
this job.
I was like a beast at it. That was like my best thing because the rest of acting school is, like, so frustrating and, like, you can't like, how do you be good? I don't know. Like, I wanna be good at this. What can I do? Trying harder makes it worse, but not with speech. Like, you can get
Gold
an A
star.
plus. Yeah, exactly. Um, so part of it is being a good student, but part of it is also, I think, just having an ear for
Yeah.
things. Um, but again, like, I always wanna get better. Like, even like, I still get coaching a lot. Like, I just took a class in estuary, which is, like,
Mhm.
modern, regular London person, like,
Ricky
because I don't feel
Gervais.
yeah, but
It's kind of an extreme estuary,
yes,
FY if
exactly,
anyone's
yeah.
listening. Yeah.
Um, but I feel like I learned RP, like, received pronunciation in school, which is, like,
Mm.
BBC in British
Yeah.
accent, right? And honestly, like, kind of dated at this point. Like, if there's a contemporary romance set in London, like, nobody talks like that,
Yeah.
Like, so I wanna be able to do that and color it with estuary so I sound like a real person.
Mhm.
Um, but also, like, there aren't that many that I can just, like, do right away and feel like, "Yeah, that's pretty good." Like, most of them, I'll have to, like, get in the zone a little. And then also the thing that I always wanna work on is, like and I wonder this about you doing American accents, like, the difference between me talking like this and me talking like this, like, I sound dumber and bitchier in the second one, but, like,
Uh-huh.
why? I don't know. Like, do you know like, I don't know what that is in other accents. Like, I know a
Right.
basic one, but I don't necessarily know, like, what are the sound changes that make it sound, like, a little smarter or a little dumber or a little meaner or a little upper or lower like, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know all the shades of it, and I want to
Yeah. I guess what I'm gleaning from that is that have quite an academic mind.
approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your how you think about things, as well as creative. Obviously, you have to be creative to do this, but, yeah, you have that sort of side to you. which is very
Yeah.
interesting, which I think helps you do accents, because I do relate to some of what you're saying, um,
Yeah.
figuring that
Also
shit out.
also though, I think I have like a I think the real trick to accents is just like going for it. Do you know what I mean? Like I think like the only reason I can do a New Zealand accent at all is because I auditioned on ACX for one of Rosalind James's books. And I was like, "Oh, I'll just do the audition." And I, like, listened to some Flight of the Conchords before and was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I think I can do it. I'll just do it." And I did it, and then I got the book. I was like, "Oh, no." And so then I got coaching, but also, like, you just have to jump in. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like with any acting, like, you just gotta commit. And, like, if you believe it and it's good enough, like, other people will buy it.
Yeah.
It's when you sound, like, hesitant and unsure that people are like, "Well, you definitely don't know what you're doing."
Yeah,
Oh,
I agree, and I had the reverse with American accents, I do wonder about the nuances and the regionality sometimes, and, um, yeah, it's easier to get it in my head and to know the little ticks and things that will work in a British or a regional British accent, but sometimes
yeah.
American, I think more, but I agree too, like, I just ended up there's this story of Danny DeVito, when he was starting out acting, and he's literally it was on some interview, and it said, 6'2", blonde, muscled guy. He's like, "I was there." Like, I turned up. He's like, just went to everything. I was like, "I can do
Yeah,
that."
yeah.
And I feel like that's the actor's life, even in books, especially when you're maybe beginning more. Uh, it's easy. You just say, "Yes. Can you do that?" "Oh, yeah, I can do that." And
Yeah,
you
definitely.
do it. You find a
Mandarin?
way to do it.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Um, but I do think it's a dangerous game, right? Like, the only reason it worked is because I do have an ear for it and, like,
Yeah.
knew that I would get the training that I needed. Because you can also destroy a relationship with a publisher really fast if you're like, "Of course I can do Swedish." And then on the day, they're like, "What the fuck is that?"
Mix of Indian, Irish, and
Right.
whatever
"I'm
else.
Swedish." Yeah, yeah.
That's true. Don't try this at home, kids.
Right, and
I
even
think
yeah, to other narrators too,
disclaimer.
like, it's a dangerous game, but there is some element of where you're just like, "You know what? I don't think my New Zealand is perfect, but people in a country speak a wide range of ways, and I'm just gonna not
Yes.
worry too much about the sound changes and just trust that this is within the zone of acceptable." You know?
Well, the proof's in the pudding because, like, you've done so well with it. So, and I agree, but I think that often comes down to with actors in general, or maybe other, uh, careers and stuff. But I speak from that perspective is also having a reasonable sense of self and being
Yes.
able to know kind of yes, and have being fearless to throw yourself into something that subconsciously, at least, even if it can
Yeah,
sometimes terrify you.
you know you can deliver.
You know you'll
Yeah,
get there.
right.
Um, so and some people, it's like, you watch those singing programs and you're like, "You do not have a singing voice." Like, I you cannot big that up with positive thinking at all. You just sound
Right,
terrible. So
right.
be creative another way. Um,
Right, pottery, I hear is great.
with your hands, just don't
Right.
please don't open your mouth. Uh,
Yes, I knowing your limitations and yeah, the far reaches of your ability and where that ends is important, for
yeah,
sure.
and being able to go out of your comfort. Yes, it's definitely a marriage, because I know
Yeah,
actors who kind of hold themselves back, and I was like, "You could do it." I have uh, a friend here, and I was like, "You could do it. You'd be great." And then I know there's that doubt. I was like, "Oh, you're letting the doubt outweigh
totally.
the
And then also
confidence."
people who are like, "Well, I don't think I could do romance because I don't have a sexy voice." And it's like, no
Mhm.
one is a sexy like, a voice is sexy because you believe it is. Like, people are handsome because they act like it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you just have to you just have to go for it and, like, maybe you're not what someone had in mind for that character, but you'll do your own thing and other people will love it, and some people will fucking hate you and tell you all over Audible reviews what a nightmare you are, and you cannot avoid that. Yeah.
Do you have any of those? Do you have any memorable ones
M
that have stuck with
I
you?
mean, I, like, stopped reading them because they hurt my
Oh, yeah.
feelings so much.
Oh,
Like
oh, bless you.
yeah. There's some of them are so mean. Oh, some of them are so mean. Oh, like, well, in Erin's play that we did,
Mm,
when she's reading the reviews at the end,
mhm.
um, do you remember what I'm talking about? You can say no,
Yes.
and I'll remind you.
No
Okay.
idea.
Okay. You were going like, "Mhm," in a way that I couldn't tell.
That's just my normal
Go on, mhm. Um, so this character that I played in that audio play is reading through her Audible reviews and being like, "Oh my god," like, someone said, like, "She sounds like Siri, but more boring." Like, that's a review that I got, that I told Erin about. And then in the reviews of Erin's audio play, someone was like, "She does sound like Siri." And I was like, "Fuck you." Um, so yeah, for my mental health, I just don't read those anymore because there'll be, you know, 15 great ones and then one bad one, and that's the one that gets you.
Well, that's an aspect of positive psychology, which I love books on that, by the way. But if in case you don't know, but that I think you need three positive. It was talking about the workplace. This particular book, like this section, you need three positives to one negative. So that's why, like, you could read all of these good things, and then you get to like a couple of yeah, like he or she, oh God, I'd get rid of them. They should never work again. And that sits with you so much more than
I
the positive
know.
ones. It's fascinating how our brain latches onto that stuff.
I know,
Um,
and it's like, I should qualify. I said "fuck you" to the person who said I sounded like Siri, but, like, of course they're allowed to like, that's why I don't
you
read
don't have
them
to be
because like,
too
they're not
diplomatic on here. That
but
you,
really, like, they're not for me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
reviews aren't for me. So, like, people can say what they want, and that gives other people information, and some people hate how I sound, and, like, they're allowed to. But it makes me feel like shit, so I don't wanna read about it.
which is complete. I don't really read them anymore either. And I used to. I used to
I
read them.
I did
Uh,
too in the beginning. I do think they're a bit gentler on the menfolk in
oh,
romance.
really? It's a
Big time, buddy.
oh, I've not. Yeah, because I've not gone through and read other people's.
Yeah,
Um,
it's I think there's a people it's easier either it's easier for listeners to criticize female narrators or female narrators as a group just suck more, and I'm
no.
guessing it's the former.
I think I'd say it's the could you imagine if I said it's definitely the
Right,
second?
it's I
I'd
mean,
never work
I'm
with
sorry to
anyone
break this to
again.
you, but it's B. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
what women, quicker to criticize other women, um,
yeah,
at
I think
times.
so, and it's probably also a function of that the men are playing the hero in the book and that's who they fall
Mm,
in love with and the woman is not, maybe it's like I don't know.
right.
I think
Well, do you
there's
think the
some
female
deeper
listener
psychology
has
there.
to has to relate to the woman narrator? So there's more of a there can be more of a disconnect. She just has to fall in love with the guy. She doesn't have to be the guy, but effectively, you're kind of she's not
Yeah,
being you, but you know what I mean? Like, she's gonna relate
right.
to the female character because that's the whole sort of
Yeah, I mean, I think
fantasy,
it's
I
easier
guess.
to be like, well, I wouldn't have done that, what she did.
Right.
That's stupid. I would have done a different thing. I don't know. I mean,
No, that can be true. I watch TV
it's
programs, I'm probably harder on the blokes. Be like, "Ah,"
really that's interesting.
probably, if I
Yeah.
think about it.
I mean,
Uh,
it's the female characters too. Like a lot of these reviews and some of these books, the men behave so badly.
I
Like,
know, it's
like
true,
it'll
yes.
be like
I've been terrible in them.
he locked her in a dungeon,
Yes.
like starved her for 2 months to try to break her spirit. And then, when he let her out, she didn't eat the bowl of cereal he gave her because she was still upset. And the review will be like, he gave her everything. Like he gave her everything she needed, and she was so ungrateful. And I'm like, lady.
It's a it's a very particular type of
Yeah.
person.
Like, I've just made that up, but it's things,
Yes.
things where I'm like, "He was, like, should be locked up," and you're saying she was yeah. So I think there is
Yeah.
a lot going on in the way that people, relate to and connect with romance, and that affects how they feel about the characters and the people
Yes.
voicing them.
And how they feel about you. Exactly.
Yeah,
Interesting. Someone should probably do a PhD on the psychology of romance.
do it.
It'd be a huge rabbit hole to pop down.
I know,
Um,
but it would also be good because romance is so disrespected in academia,
completely.
and it shouldn't be.
Yes. Someone will do it and and win some sort of notable prize, and everyone will be
Right.
shocked. Be like, "See, told you. There's a
Yeah.
whole ton of shit going on over here you didn't look at." Um, excuse me. Now, before I move off of accents, you're one of the few, American females, I would say, that is also happy doing a Scots accent, with me at least. Because
Yeah.
I have, through different books and, I produced Anna Duran stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of reached out to somebody, and I did get from, really great narrators. I just got a flat sort of, no.
Right. No,
I
we're not
tried
gonna
that
do that.
one, Jesus, the Scots one, and it's Scots, and I think I was very intrigued by that. But you're like, "Oh, yeah." I don't know if you did it before, you just were like, "I'll give it a go,"
I
and
mean,
then it was great.
yeah, that it was basically I'll give it a go. Like, I've done it before, and I, like, know how to do it, so, like, how hard can it be? I'll figure it out. And it did.
And you did really
Yeah.
well.
But
Um,
I did just take another I've been doing some random coaching sessions because, my one of the dialect coaches I like going to periodically is doing some Zoom stuff, so I just did a Scots class with her because I know you and I have some stuff coming up, and I wanted to brush
yeah.
up on it.
Yeah, we do next year,
Yeah,
which we'll throw in at the end.
okay.
Um, but yeah, but I think one last to say on that subject is I think one of the great things with your Scots one, I don't know. Well, I've actually heard you're British and everything. Like you're very good at getting the nuances and the subtleties that make it sound not like someone doing an accent, that makes it actually sound like someone speaking in their natural voice, which is the whole
Well, thank you,
fucking
that's really
key.
nice of you to say.
You're welcome. But the Scots thing I noticed, like you don't it was less is more, I would say, with you. You just kinda you when you were doing my voice, because you basically the point of that book was that you had to be me as a Scot, and I
Mhm,
was Scottish the whole time.
right.
And so when you did the guy's voice, like, you had to do that, but you didn't I would say more Scottish than you are, but it worked so well because your kind of
Good.
slightly less is more just was
Yeah,
perfect and just, like, fitted right in.
I'm glad. I mean, I feel like when you do accents, you're generally pretty chill about them too, at least British ones. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you don't wanna sound like a joke, and you never do. Um,
God.
but you know what? It's, like, really easy, like, 'cause some of them, like, there are legit Irish accents that if you did them real, would sound like a joke, you know? Like, same with Scottish, like, I was talking about this with Saskia, you know Saskia Marleveld?
Yeah.
Um, she, does some New Zealand stuff too, and she was talking about how, like, there's, like, what the accent is, and then there's, like, the audiobook version of it.
Yeah.
Where, like, you know, it's the same with Boston or something where, like, if you really go hardcore, like, as hard as some people are in real life, like, it will be unlistenable.
Mhm.
So, like, you have to do it in a way that is clearly is correct, but is also, like, easy listening.
It's listenable. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
It's like with wines, they're like, "It's drinkable," right? Like, that's what I don't like, you're like, "It goes down easy." And
it
then with
goes down
side
easy.
characters, like the woman who runs the market, you can sound as ridiculous
Right.
as you want.
Yeah. That's, no, that's a very good point because I had in London, a very good mate of mine, was Irish, and on the phone, I couldn't fucking understand him hardly ever. I was like, "I honestly don't know what you're saying."
Where was
In
he
real life,
from?
okay, I can't remember which part of Ireland he was from, but it's like from proper like, deep Ireland somewhere, and he lived in London for so long. Uh, and I just still on the phone, I was like, "I don't know what you're saying." But in person, I got most of it.
Right.
It was a mixture of the accent with the fucking speed that he spoke that I was
Right.
like,
Well,
"You've lost me."
Dublin particularly, they speak like they speak like they're on coke. Like, they speak
A mile a
so
minute.
fast. Yeah.
That must be it, I can't remember. And I also had a French friend who had lived out of the country for I still have him, he's still a good mate of mine, but,
You
and
still have him in your
I s
collection.
yeah.
Yeah. It's no
Well,
big
some
deal.
people you lose touch with. I lost touch with my
Yeah,
Irish
yeah.
mate,
No, no, I
but,
know.
my French mate, we still WhatsApp and stuff, and, he's been out of the country for so long, and when I met him, he hadn't been back for, like, 6 years, but he's did toi like this,
But he was still dogging like
and I was like, "What the fuck? Did you just, like, Pepe Le Pew? Like, what the hell happened?" And he still does speak like that. He leaves me, like, voice messages, and I think it's still there, regardless. But you're right. So when I do the same, like, when I do accents, especially ones where I'm doing say someone's German, Italian, French, like, I do probably more European maybe than maybe other people,
Y
I don't know.
yeah,
It's the flavor. It's kind of the thing that I'm saying about your Scots. It was like a bit less is more. It's like it's got to be listenable. It's got to be relatable. And those people are speaking in this French and German. Like they're speaking English as a second language anyway. So
yeah,
how does their accent sound? It's like it just has to be something that you can latch onto and you take as
right.
like, oh yeah, like, can you get into that? but at the
That's
same time, you want to listen to it for hours.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about accents versus dialects, right? Because dialects is like Irish, like English
Mm,
is the language that they grew up
yeah,
speaking. They just speak it with that accent, and that's a dialect. But someone who's German speaking with an American accent, like it can sound however you want because it's
exactly.
not
Yeah.
real. Like it's supposed to be they're doing it poorly or like not perfectly, you know? Like if
Or
it
they
was
sound
perfect, they
almost
wouldn't have an
British, but,
accent.
like, have a
Yeah.
flavor. Like, that's where I sometimes go to. But that's a good
Yeah.
differentiation, which I dumbly didn't make. Dialects versus accents.
um But also, like, a lot of those, like, Italian, German, Spanish, like, they kinda some of them sound pretty samey sometimes. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, not maybe German and Spanish, but, like, Italian, Spanish, German, Italian,
Yeah.
like, they're, French, like, they you kind of just have to pick some sounds that are gonna be your distinguishing ones, because
Yeah.
otherwise they're kinda hard to tell apart.
True, true. I think that's Italian and French sometimes. I think Italian just has more musicality with
Mhm.
them, than in it or just in a different musicality, and that's sometimes what I would
Yeah.
latch onto as opposed to
Yeah, yeah.
much else. We'll see someone will comment. They'll be like, "His Italian's
Right.
atrocious." I don't know where he
I
thinks he's
know.
from.
I know.
Milano? No, I don't know where that is.
Right.
Now, I wanted to ask you because it came out, just today, Exquisite Touch.
One.
Oh, we're gonna
Exquisite
talk
touch,
about
comma, one exquisite
oh, yeah,
touch?
one ex
Yeah.
oh, is that This is how good I am with titles. I have this every when I do with Viv, I'm like she's like, "What's that book called?" I was like, "Oh, shit, hold on, I
No,
have
no,
to remember."
no, yeah,
Uh,
the guy
it's
and
One
I don't
Exquisite Touch.
right.
Okay, which is you're the centerpiece, right? It's really told
Well, that
mainly from
element.
your point of view,
Is it? I
or
don't
you
know.
and
I
Joe?
mean, I read
I
the
had
whole
a small
thing, but
part in
I
it,
didn't,
so it
like,
was a little
total
bit
it up. I bet
uh
Joe has almost as much as me. I don't
Okay,
know.
so it's a 50-50. But maybe
Yeah.
it's because, like, it's Lauren's sort of very what does she call it? Very sex positive. So I feel like the focus has been
Yeah.
very much on you and your character, as it should be.
Yeah. I think yeah, and also because the sort of hero part was at least sort of split between you guys for part of the
Mm,
book. Um, yeah, that book was awesome. And people are focusing on the sex, like, it's really there's a lot of sex in that book.
yeah.
Um, but not to the detriment of a storyline, and there is this really sex positive storyline. Have you not heard that term before, sex positive?
I have, but I haven't heard it for a while, and then I saw it, I think, on Twitter. I was like, "Oh, yeah." It
Yeah,
was a bit of a word in LA for a hot minute. I heard it a bunch of
yeah,
times, and I didn't hear it.
yeah. It's just I mean, I think particularly when it comes to unconventional sexual relationships or fetishy things or niches within the romance writing community, like maybe it's time to air it out again. Because
Yeah,
like no one should be ashamed of liking what they like.
yeah,
And that's like such a great part of that particular story that Lauren was telling. I,
yeah,
I really
yeah.
appreciated that.
Oh,
'Cause
no,
it wasn't
that's
just some books will be like, this is what it is and we love it. But this one, it was more like her going on that journey of being like, should I be feel bad about this? Like, actually, no.
yeah.
You know? So I thought that was great.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah, and there's more to come in that whole sort of
Mm-hmm.
series. I know
Yeah,
that's a avenue Lauren's going down.
I know.
So yeah, we'll
I mean,
see.
all that I know there's at least oh anyway, I won't say anything because I don't know what
Yeah,
she
I
said.
don't know what you never know the mastermind behind the
Right.
what she's putting out there at any
But yeah,
particular time.
she's seeded some other stories already in there, so it'll be
Yeah.
exciting.
You never know how much she's edging, people on social media to get, teasing. So I was like,
She
"Okay."
is a big tease. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, you never know just how soon or not she's going to reach the climax of that particular
Exactly. Now back to business a little bit, and I've discussed this. Back to business. I just
back
wanted to
to
throw in exquisite.
business.
Back to
Enough
business,
sex. Yeah.
segueing into, um, now I've asked authors about this, and you've, like, kinda touched on it off the mic, um, about it sounds so weird, doesn't it? Off the record,
Off the
like I'm a
record.
journalist.
Yeah.
I really am a serious journalist with this podcast.
I can
Um,
tell.
there's the the sort of the marrying of talent to do what we do, and I've asked authors this, talent to write versus having a head for business,
Mhm.
to kind of make this work. And I asked them sort of, I think I asked Ava Harrison particularly, like, how do you feel like that marries up? Like, what's the, you need both obviously, but where does your 50-50, whatever. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think I have my own thoughts, but what do you think on like narrators having to have the natural talent, but also like the head for the business?
I
Uh,
think I think in the olden days of the 90s and early aughts, you didn't have to have any head for business because you were just hired and you would go into the studio and that's it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, but now that indie stuff is more of a factor and that there are so many more narrators, you have to, even if you're not producing, you're managing your brand and you're getting noticed and you're an entrepreneur, right? You're like
yeah,
trying to sell yourself to all these different publishers and maintain those relationships and sort of craft that brand. Um, I don't think, I think that if you had talent but no business sense, you might get really lucky.
hmm,
And someone would hear you. And if there was something, particularly if there's something unique about your voice, maybe that's enough. If they're like, we've been looking for exactly what you are, and we couldn't find that before. So great. Here's plenty of jobs for the rest of your life. Um, but but by the same token, I also think there's people that are really savvy at selling themselves, and that's enough. Even
yeah.
if you know, even if maybe the artistic side isn't as developed, it ends up not mattering to the success of their career. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know when you started doing this, but, like, I came up through ACX. Like, I built a little home studio and started
Uh-huh.
auditioning for projects and, like, clawed my way up. Like
Like that
um,
image.
so for me, it was at least as important to be I don't even know if I would call it just business sense, but I think I'm a pretty good networker. Like
Mhm.
I like making friends and I like people and those genuine relationships turn into job opportunities sometimes. And I like, when we could all see each other, like I like going to events and that was really helpful. And so for me, I think that was necessary to get to a certain point. And then I could have stayed at that point, but I'm interested in developing further and like I'm doing more producing now. I'll tell you more about this off mic. But I do want to talk to you about it. Not because I can hire you for it because there's no British people, but just like friend to talk about business things. I'm producing a series for the Moo You hockey series for Serena Bowen's World of True North. She like opened up the world of one of her series for other authors to write in, and I'm producing
Mhm.
one track of that, and I'm really excited about that. I just, I want to have a bigger career than just working for an hourly wage,
Yeah.
because who knows when that'll be over. Um, but so for me, I think business was more important than artistry to get to a certain point, and then from there on, they're kind of the same. But what about you?
You touched on a bunch of stuff. I think, as a working actor, uh, that's really my barometer because I think it's the same with TV and film. It's sort of be, you could get lucky and you could
Yeah.
become famous and then you could be on that show or you could be in that movie. But I think even then, there's always the marrying up of luck, natural talent with an awareness and whether you call it a business head or whatever, but just a forethought for going forward. Like you said, I don't necessarily just want to do this or just narrate for other people. I'll produce my own. I'll do these kind of other avenues and pursue
Yeah.
these different. For me, it was pursuing different genres. Building. I started
Hmm.
in the I feel like an old movie person where I started in the studio system, like
MGM bought me out for 7 years, and
in the 50s.
me
Uh,
and Kate Hepburn did a number of pictures.
I started with publishers, and I kind of thought that was all it was. And I was lucky that Random House is in LA, so they have a studio, and that sort of gave me, I guess, a cachet and people to reach out to others.
Hmm.
Um, but then it was a case of I could have just stuck with that, and I know friends who have. but then I was always beholden to what they would give me, or I didn't really have, I could stay in touch and stuff, and that's important. But I was at the behest of
Yeah.
producers
And
and
you can
stuff.
only write so many of those, like, just checking in. My fall schedule opens up in November. If anything comes across your desk, I might be a good fit for before you want to shoot yourself in the face. Hey, here's a couple projects I've been working on. How are you? Ugh, the pandemic. Anyway, my December's pretty free. Yeah,
Yeah, and I found that I had
I
to.
still do that, of
You
course.
said, you probably do it out of necessity, because now I found that I stay in touch with people to let them know my availability, so that they don't think that I'm just booked forever, and that they can never, if they have something interesting, which I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you're in the same boat. But
I am, but I have to work harder for the non-romance titles than you do, I think. I like I don't have the right balance right now, and I want
oh,
to make that happen more.
we'll discuss that off mic
Okay, off the
today.
air.
Off the air. But what was I saying? No, I then, just to go back to like the business, I then built the home studio. Like, I
Ah,
managed to book a job, which was 15 books over every one a month. And I was like, okay,
wow,
so this was years and years
it's
ago, and it
time.
wasn't
Yeah.
romance. And I was like, well, let me transition into doing that. And then I kind of had hired the engineer to come here. And anyway, it just kind of managed. And he actually kind of helped me. So I was very lucky. He kind of taught me a few things while we were working in my home studio. And then that allowed me to branch out. And then again, moving into romance, you start to, Shane was born, and then all the things that come with that, and doing this
Oh,
podcast and da, da, da. And it
yeah,
is a sort of, I love doing a lot of it, but it's also a marrying up of not just sitting there kind of waiting for the phone to ring, um,
yeah,
which can be an
yeah.
actor's life, which I don't particularly, never really
No,
enjoyed.
I don't love either. And the romance industry, I think this is probably true with sci-fi as well, or any of the other um genre fiction is such a like derogatory term because it makes it seem like it's not just like fiction, like it's not just books that people
Hmm.
are writing, but I think of sci-fi and romance as genres that do really well, particularly for indie authors. And like there's so many like rock star entrepreneurs, like so many
Yeah.
of these authors are like incredible, like what they're creating as business people for themselves. So it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I agree. I've learned a lot from the romance side of things, and from
Yeah.
authors, and how they promo themselves, and how important that is, and then how successful
Yeah.
they are on their own, versus kind of, I've heard from people, well, I don't need to publish with these people. Like, I have, I do better by myself than going
Right.
through
Yeah.
publishers
Indie
and
used to
stuff.
be like, well, if you can't sell it to a publisher, I suppose you
Yeah.
can put it out yourself on like WordPress or whatever. And now, like, it's in some of these authors' financial interest to
Yeah,
keep it all.
completely,
Yeah.
completely. Um, now, M continuing on that theme a little bit, like, do you think at this point, how do you think it is for women to make a name for themselves in the romance arena?
Ooh,
Um,
it's a
I think it's
lot harder
changed
than
over
it is
the
for
year.
men.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the other question, part of the question.
like, I'm so I hope he doesn't listen to this. You met my boyfriend.
Yeah.
He's like a wonderful guy. He doesn't have like this voice that's what you need if you're an American guy who wants to get into romance. And so I'm like trying to coach him. I like want him to do it because I feel like if he could just get that, like, I think that if you're a guy and you have that voice and you're a little bit smart about social media, you're
Yeah.
good. Like, you can
Mhm.
make it happen. Someone will fall in love with you, and then you'll be on all these podcasts. Like, I've seen it happen with a couple guys in the past couple years, and
Mm.
it's made me feel sort of resentful because, like, I'm glad for their success, but also, like, the women have to, like, put in years of, like, clawing our way up and getting a little bit noticed and, like, trying to it just takes a lot longer. It's really hard. It's a full marketplace, and there's so many really talented female narrators, like,
Yeah.
already, who don't get enough work. Um,
Do you think that's
but
because there are just, like in acting,
like with acting in general? Yeah,
yeah, they're always like,
same.
"Well, there's just less blokes, so you're
Yeah.
kinda lucky from the get-go in some respects."
I mean, it must be. I don't know why it is. I don't know. It's a mind bender because like, when when I produce stuff, like I hire guys for it. But there's only like, I don't know, 6 or 10 guys that I want to hire for any project max. Like,
Mm.
and if I'm casting the women, I could easily think of like 40.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, is it true outside of romance, do you think? I don't feel like there are that many more female narrators. Oh, but again, I mean, outside of romance, I feel like there's less opportunities for female narrators because not most, but a lot of nonfiction is like by men to be voiced by men. Um, like I would love to do more nonfiction, but there's not as much unless it's
Right.
self.
For
Yeah.
female. Interesting. I've never really thought about that side of things so
And
much.
with classics, like you get classics, I don't get classics. There aren't any classics for, like there aren't classics written by American women because American women aren't really classics. We've only been around for a
Right.
couple hundred years. um, so,
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic that I haven't even thought about.
but yeah, but that doesn't address your question, which is, I mean, I think it's harder, but I also don't think it's impossible. I do
Mm.
think either you have to get an in with a publisher who's just going to hire you for a bunch of stuff and like doesn't really care what fans think, and then maybe fans will fall in love with you, or you have to genuinely like interacting with fans. I feel like
Yeah.
that's what I did. Like I'm just around. But
Yeah.
that's not because I'm trying to promote myself necessarily. It's just because I'm like chatty. like like I'm just social and I like want like I'd love to talk to people. I'd love to do whatever. So like I think that was a big part of what helped me. Um
Mm. Well,
I don't know.
I mean, there are. I'm trying to break it down. I think I do. I think men, there are less of us. I speak from a niche market because
Yeah.
there's not many Brit males in romance. There's in regular fiction or whatever, like other sides of other genres, there's guys.
Yeah,
Although
but
even when I
still
began,
not a
they were
ton. Yeah.
no, and they were tended
Yeah.
to be older. Uh,
Do you think it's
s-
partly because in Britain, the union doesn't have uh there isn't a strong union and so the pay isn't as good and so not as many people go into audiobooks and voiceover?
I think it was not a thing. Yeah, I mean, I would never thought of doing a book until had lived here, and then it
Yeah.
just sort of happened and came out of nowhere. And yeah, back home, more people back home now are working for American companies
Yeah.
because we can. It's just so easy. But yeah, there's not like you don't want to do audiobooks in the UK, from my understanding,
Yeah,
because
same.
it's
That's what I
like
understand too.
you'll be
I mean,
on
not
bread
if
and
you wanna
water.
eat and own a home. Yeah, or own a home is a big but, have a
Yeah,
roof over your head.
have a
Yeah.
regular try and have a middle class life maybe, or what used to be,
Right.
something like that.
Living the
Um,
dream where someday you can afford a car. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, I have wondered about, yeah, female narrators, but more so in the romance genre and how that kind of, um, shakes out. Because I will say I mean, now I produce stuff, but there is I do have a longer list definitely of female narrators
Yeah.
covering different angles and different types of voice, but I definitely have a list of go-tos. Um,
Yeah.
and then other people can come into that. I've had other people that I've like newer people, and they just fit. So maybe there are
No, no
some
new people. Only use those.
but some come along that have just kinda like,
Yeah, they're perfect for something. Yeah.
like Vanessa Edwin wasn't,
Mhm.
like I think I recommended her to Lauren, and she was
You
working a
did.
lot outside of romance, and
Yes.
that's just one of those maybe it's one of those kismet things, like you say, like the right voice, it's like boom, and then, everyone seemed to fall in love with her, and she's done
She
fantastically because
yeah,
she's
she's
great.
wonderful. And she's also I mean, the other part of it is if you're a woman, you only become successful if you are pleasant to work with and
Yeah.
cool. That's not true for men.
Oh, we a bunch of assholes.
To the same degree, right? Like, if you're a woman, you have to
Yeah,
deliver all your files on time. You have to be completely on top of your shit. You have to write professional emails, be social, be nice, be a good business person. Like, there's no
yeah.
room for bad behavior because the competition is so much tighter, you know?
I mean,
Uh,
that probably speaks to a larger sort of, uh, dynamic, doesn't it, in general that,
of expectations.
women
Yeah,
complain about. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, if I'm tough, I'm a bitch. If a guy does it, he's in
for
charge." It's like,
sure.
it's such a fucking
For sure, particularly when it comes to money stuff, I would say. But I do think that there is a lower bar for guys with that type of stuff because
mm.
if it's like, well, I'm not going to work with him again because he delivered his files late, but then like who else? Like it's got to be him, like because there just aren't as many great guys at hand.
Yeah.
Um, so they have more power in terms of rates and behavior, I think. I don't
Probably.
know.
Yeah, and I've named no names, not people that people wouldn't know, I would say. But I remember back earlier on, maybe I worked with some people, and I did notice the difference between the women were a lot more communicative,
Hmm.
and I sort of
You mean in terms
was,
of like, here are the voices that I was going to
yeah,
do for
like,
these
"What are we doing
characters?
on
Yeah.
this?" And and I would just,
Yeah.
and some of the blokes would just be a bit like, either
Yeah.
you wouldn't say
Like
anything.
whatever. Yeah. Let's do whatever I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
And,
just
and to be clear, the thing about like assholes, real assholes don't work whether they're male or female. Like if
true.
you're a real piece of shit, like word will get around and you will not continue to be hired. So the
Mhm.
people who keep getting hired, for all those listeners out there who are like, who's the asshole? Like no one you know because you wouldn't hear them anymore. Like like uh
True.
but but I do think yeah, I do think the bar's in a different place and maybe part of it is just scarcity. I don't know
It
why
could,
that
I don't
is.
know.
I mean, do you have guy actor friends who you're like, why don't you do this? You have a sexy voice?
No, and or just books in general. I don't
Yeah.
have. I know I had used to have more actor friends probably when I was on camera because I'd go to auditions and
Yeah.
stuff, and so I had
Same with
acquaintance
me in
friends.
theater. Yeah.
So I kind of lost touch with those. But I remember recommending some of those when I got into it, and a few of them went and tried it, and they're like, "I'm never doing that again."
Yeah, it turns
Like
out
they,
it's a lot harder than we think because we just are good at it. Like
they
some people really can't do it.
Yeah, they're like, no, no." I was so exhausted from that book. It's
Yeah.
just I can't. I don't. And I got it. I was like, yeah. And
No,
back
it's
in
a
the day, I was
marathon
like, I wouldn't mind to turn up on set and just get cups of tea and be called over for a
for
little
5
rehearsal and
minutes. Yeah,
then go back to the trailer for a while. And although
right. It's
that had its own
it's
things.
right. But yeah, narrating isn't glamorous at
Yeah,
all.
it's not easy. But once you kind of dive into it, like I couldn't imagine not doing it now. That's the funny thing.
Same. And
Um,
now everyone wants to do it because nothing else is happening,
yeah, there you
right?
go. Uh, but I will just highlight your point because I thought that as well when I was talking about the business versus talent aspect. That if I was, say, was asked, or I was asked to go into a drama school and sit down with people, I'd be like, I would say one of the biggest key things to having a good working career as a working actor, I'm not talking about getting famous or any of that stuff, it's like,
Yeah.
is being somebody that people want to fucking work with.
Yeah. It's
Because that's a
the
big
biggest
part.
thing. Yeah, totally.
Anyway,
And
so
the
be
other
nice.
yeah. Yeah, be pleasant, but also be pleasant because like you're working like most of your waking hours are devoted to this job and you might
Mhm.
as well enjoy it and like have it be like part of what makes it doable is that the people I'm talking to like you or co-narrators are like they're my friends. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like it would be unbearably lonely if I wasn't also friendly and enjoyed
yeah.
talking to these authors and narrators and everybody and
Yeah,
publishers.
it all feeds into itself.
Yeah.
Um, now
The
my
one the
Go
wait,
on.
can I
You
go
wanna
back for one sec? The one thing I
Yeah.
wanted to mention, though, is that the difference with the business in terms of audiobooks is that you're your own agent, right? So
Yes.
for TV and film, you have to have a good business sense and have drive and ambition, but your agent is doing the extra shitty parts of being like, "Hey, pick her, they
Yeah.
didn't pick you." And so for this, you have to do that for yourself, and there's no buffer or bulldog to negotiate for you, so that makes
Yeah.
it
That is a very good point to make because we don't use I mean, I think I've done one book with my agent.
I don't
Uh,
even have one. Yeah.
my
It
voiceover
doesn't
agent.
matter.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
you
no.
really don't need one to do this or to do a lot of voice in general at this point, I think.
Yeah,
But I agree with you. But that's part of what I think drew me in more and more was that I wasn't beholden. Like my agent work is now a sideline. It's sort of if a nice fun job comes up or it's in a different,
great.
games or whatever, but
Yeah,
it's not something don't rely on that at all. This is kind of what I rely on really. This is my
me too.
livelihood and I love being in charge of that,
Yeah,
not waiting for someone to send me an audition or
Right, or to judge
Try
you
and plug me
worthy
in.
of some opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of what I love. But my last question before we can wrap up,
Okay.
and just you can tell us what's coming up for you. Is
Okay.
I've always wanted to ask this question to a female narrator. Is that so some of the trope you kind of touched on it a bit earlier with some of the, locked in a dungeon, which was a fictional thing, but it's probably happened somewhere,
Lightly fictionalized.
likely
Yeah.
fictional, is, some of the tropes and themes in romance. And I understand, for me, romance is, it's an escape. It's entertainment, or it can be a lot deeper than that too, but it's a place you go to for yourself or like listeners, readers. A lot of the themes though and tropes sort of the men can be typically, can be very alpha, or the dynamics between the men and women can be quite typical, like maybe more traditional in a power dynamic, or I don't know if I'm thinking about the boss and like we did where I was,
Uh-huh.
it was in the workplace. And I
Right.
think one
Doing
of the
things
opening
that
scene was I grabbed your ass and I was like,
Right.
you can't do that
Right.
anymore.
In
Like
real
you
life,
wouldn't. No,
don't do that anymore.
don't
Yeah.
do that, people. Don't do this at home, kids. So I sometimes wonder about that dynamic. Uh, like what do you think on that versus like the real world that we now live in, which is post Me Too, and you know,
Yeah.
we've made
It's a
strides in sort of highlighting
it's
the inequalities.
it's a big question. I
Yeah.
mean, I think there's a couple different levels to that. So, one I would say is that these books are fantasy, a lot of them. You know, some of them seem a little more realistic, but they're
Yeah.
basically like escapist fantasy, particularly the ones that are either really wild sexually, like One Exquisite Touch is fantasy. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, that's not like, yes, it's something that people can and do in their real lives, but it's a it's a hot escape for people.
Yeah.
But that is one where it's like healthy, and you actually could do that. Like, that is okay to do. Consenting adults can all do that, and it's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's like
Yeah.
a real life fine thing to happen, even though it is probably unlikely to happen for most listeners. But then I would say there's a category where it's like fantasies that are really not for real life, like things where it's like she gets thrown in a dungeon
Ah,
and starved, and then she's his whatever forever. And like a lot of the BDSM, I I don't know as much as I probably should about the BDSM community in real life,
yeah.
but a lot of the books that deal with BDSM, I don't think adhere particularly closely to the real life version of it. They're just
Right.
sort of using it as a turn on. But I would put that stuff in the category of like, it is okay to use as a fantasy as long as you can differentiate between fantasy and real life. Like, I, I
Mm.
hope I'm not, I don't think I hope I'm not alone in this, in that some of my sexual fantasies are not things that I would want in real life and are like weird. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everyone has at least a couple things that you're like, I almost wish that didn't turn me on to think about. I don't like it, but like, what are you gonna do? Yeah, like,
Yeah.
but like, that's how I think of those books, where it's like, it's not for real life. Like, that is just for pretend and to get your rocks off, basically. Like, that is
Right.
just like an exciting escape. So in that sense, I think it's fine that some of these books, like the that book that you're talking about, like, it was fine. He would if my
Oh,
boss
totally.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, like, if my boss, and I know you, I'm not saying, like, it was fine, like, I know you think this too, but
Mm.
if my boss in real life actually, like, if I was at a audiobook conference and a publisher that can hire me grabs my ass, like, even if
Yeah.
he's hot, that's not
That's
cool.
not yeah.
Like, I'm gonna say so to his supervisors. But, like, I'm fine with a book where that is how it starts and then it's great and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. I
I
think,
guess because we know where they're gonna end. We
yeah,
know already that there's a sexual chemistry, or even if, say, your character is kinda doesn't like, God, he's a gruff, like, whatever Scots, but, like, there's a turn on for your character, even though you don't even want it to be. Not necessarily in that book, but other books I've read
right.
where it's like, she's like, she's trying to say, "I don't like him," but, like, deep down, she's like, "Oh, I really wanna."
Yeah.
So there's always that dynamic that's going on for the listener, reader, which isn't in real life. I don't know what's
Right.
going on in your head. I don't, so
I'm not gonna tell you. That's my private business. Um,
exactly.
but I will say, I do think there's I think for some of that stuff, it's really, like, explicitly, like, this is a like, escape into this, but it's not for real. Like,
Mm,
the author of that book was not suggesting that in real life
at
that is
all.
an okay thing, you know?
Yeah.
I do think there's some books where it's more of a gray area, and I think it can be really problematic, where, like, you know,
Hmm.
sort of where someone's being emotionally manipulated
Yeah.
by the hero, and it's, like, really uncomfortable, but, like, supposed to be sexy. Um, and I
Yeah.
worry about that because I think for some people, I I don't know, you know, everyone is on their own journey of this, and I think some authors maybe aren't really thinking about the implications of that sometimes. And I think some
Mm.
listeners maybe are hearing it as if it's really sexy and would be sexy in real life when it's not healthy.
Mm.
Um,
It's
I don't
interesting.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the question comes with, like, for anyone listening, it's like it's no judgment, and I would be
Yeah,
interested to
not
hear
at
other
all.
people's sort of like perspective on it, and that's kind of why I ask it because I have a a British man's perspective on what I read, so it's kind of interesting to hear other people's and a female perspective on it. Um, and I agree, and I for all narrators there are grey areas, and there are some books that people aren't comfortable with
Yeah,
and
there's lines
doing.
like some people enjoy rape fantasies, and
Mm,
like I don't want to narrate that. Like I don't want to live that fantasy out
yeah,
at all. Like I don't want to be the person saying those words just for my own mental health.
yeah,
But I'm not. But as long as someone knows that's a fantasy, like I'm not like what you
yeah,
like. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that's fine.
It's an interesting, yeah, it's a real rabbit hole. I feel like that whole topic. You
Totally.
can kind of, and I've touched on it with people off mic. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's hard to talk about on mic because also this is our livelihood, and a lot of the books we
yeah,
read aren't going to be to our personal political or sexual taste. And like
yeah,
that, as long as you're okay with telling that story because you know it's really for someone else, like that's fine.
yeah,
Um, I was
yeah.
talking to I was talking to a bunch of a couple female narrators lately, um, and we were talking about how in a lot of these books, it can be sort of exhausting. How there's often, particularly in certain subgenres, how there's often the women who will not be taken seriously by the men in the series, like who aren't seen as potential brides, are always like grasping, screeching sluts who are trying to steal the man.
Right.
And like, I wouldn't be sad to see that die.
Um,
Like, I don't think that's a great, I don't know.
uh-huh.
Like, I really appreciate books in which, like, I think this is true about Serena Bowen's books and Lauren's books and tons of them where like there isn't a evil bitch bad guy. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, there's no bad guy. It's just people trying to figure their shit out, and like life is
yeah,
hard, and that's where you get the roller coaster of the relationship. It's not like there's somebody trying to steal a man.
yeah.
Um, I kind of feel like that's not a great gender
Hmm.
stereotype to amplify, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think, I mean, it'd be interesting. We'll see when we will have this conversation again in another few years,
And
and see
everything will be
how,
solved. Yeah.
or just see how, like, it's. I mean, that's kind of where the genesis of the question is. It's sort of how much, I guess, real life sometimes affects this,
Yeah.
affects what we do or art forms or films or anything kind of thing. But this particular one, 'cause talking about audiobooks, um, and that's where, I start at the beginning with the book that we did where I was like, well, I grabbed your ass early on when you didn't really know me in the
Hmm.
workplace. I wasn't actually working at that workplace, but I was like coming for an interview with my brother and I grabbed his secretary's arm. I was like, that's that wouldn't go
It's
down.
very Mad Men. Yeah.
But
Um,
the book worked great, and as you said,
yeah, and
that
also
separation of
that
fantasy and
those
real life.
characters, it wasn't a kind of relationship where he did whatever he wanted, and she kept her mouth shut even if she hated it.
Oh
Do you know what I
no,
mean? I think that's what bothers me. Is I think in some books you know, people can behave so badly, but as long as they're called on it and it's aired out
Uh-huh.
eventually, like, great, that's what happens in real life too, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like everyone has to be respectful and perfect and well,
Mhm.
politically correct is such sort of been stolen, and that doesn't mean what it should mean anymore. But it's not like I need heroes to be w- neutered and well behaved. I just need when they cross
Right.
lines and it really hurts the heroine. I
Yeah.
hope that by the end of the book, that gets aired out and she doesn't just swallow it or learn to like the thing
Yeah.
she
Oh
hates or
god.
whatever.
Yeah, I
That's
think most of the books I've ever done, so I don't know about yours, but most books I've ever done, or pretty much I can't think of any that I have done that I have always had that. Like, there are some that have skirted close to the guys, and I've said this on other interviews, like, the guy is a real asshole, especially at the beginning, and I've really find it hard to relate to that person.
yeah.
But then by the end, he has had to come to Jesus, like,
Yes,
it's
there's
just a
been some
lot there's a real
balancing.
and
Yeah.
he really goes down to come back up and become a different person, and, she's there for him still, and or he has to win her back, and so I've done a lot of, not a lot, but I've done, some of those, and even with the ones where the like you pointed out, which was a good point, like the one we did, I I may have grabbed your ass in that.
You keep saying that. You just like talking about it.
Because I remember in my head, I was like, "Oh, I don't know, like, yeah, okay. I don't know I'd get in trouble for that." But 'cause I was talking
Little
like
Roger
this, and
Ailes
so it's
there.
all just very, I was like, "Okay." And then, uh, but yeah, the heroine wasn't a sort of wallflower. She wasn't like, it was like she could have turned around and punched him in the face, you know what
Right,
I
she
mean? Like,
wasn't
she had that
afraid of
guts.
him
Yeah,
and
not
yeah,
at all.
quiet, yeah.
So you kind of take all of those sort of power dynamics out, which, in the real world really come into play and make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Um,
funny. I did a book this summer, a Kate Canterbury book, and I might be remembering this wrong, but there was one scene where they're having sex and it's, like, getting really rough, and I feel like something happens where, uh, I forget who it is that says it, but it's something to the effect of someone's like, "Yeah, I'll make you do it," and then he's like, "Oh, like, you know that I wouldn't. We're just this is,
right.
like, a thing we're doing," and she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, of course." But, like, that's I loved that,
Yeah.
because I feel like that's, like, the real life version of this stuff, where you're like, "Yeah, you can play around with all this stuff,
Yes.
but, like, everybody has to feel safe and on the same page for it to really be fun."
Yeah.
But I do also think it's fine in books where, like, the book is the fantasy, and you
Mhm.
don't have to do the real life version, you just know, like, it's a book, so, like,
Yeah.
it's fine. And it's really complicated, and, like, I'm really, uh, feminist and have, like, a lot to say about all this stuff, but I don't know it's tricky. It's a
Well,
tricky
yeah.
tightrope to walk, to be
It's
like, "I do this professionally, some of it bothers me, I
uh-huh.
know that it doesn't bother some other people, and so I can honor that, but, like, I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah. Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of feelings about it, you know?
Well,
Um,
yeah. And as I say, I mean, I'd be interested to hear when people hear this, if they have any comments, so feel free to sort of
yeah.
in the interest of a discussion, not in a
Yeah. I would say the vast majority of the books that I've done that I've been like, "Oh, shit," like, have been old. I
older.
think that
Yeah.
I think that, stuff that's written now is written not everything, but a lot of it is different,
Yeah.
in a good way, like,
I
and
agree.
more aware of what's healthy to model, even if it is just a pretend fantasy thing.
Yeah, or I've noticed like just a reflection of the real world, like someone talking about their wife or their husband, and it's the same sex. I don't know. There's just like other
Yeah,
kind
I
of
like that
avenues with
too.
modern stuff where it's like, oh yeah, like it's not that kind of typical thing. Maybe older books subscribe to. So
Right.
anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole any further because I think we
Okay. It's
because
dangerous.
we've got to, yeah, it's that's for another one, part two. Um, but before we close up, I just want to, is there, if there's anything you'd like to highlight that you have coming up, coming
Um,
out, whatever?
I'm excited about Lauren's release today, and I hope and trust that that will do really well and people will love that. Uh,
We'll know by the time this airs, I think,
we,
because it'll be it's
if
a
it's
couple
a
of weeks.
flop or a
I
success,
can't imagine it being a flop, but
no, I
we'll
can't
see
either. I
how
don't know what you're
successful it
assuming
is.
we'll know. Yeah. Um, I'm looking back at my schedule. I like, particularly with lockdown, everything is just blending together. Like I
Hmm.
don't know what's happening or when things are being released. My schedule says things like maybe PRH book that I like don't even know what that was. Did I do it? I don't know. That was in September. I don't know what it was. um uh I don't know. I'm excited about the Karen Gray's book, Forget About Me, which I co-narrated with Brian Polino, which is coming out not not super super soon, but soon. It's like
Yeah.
recorded. Um Lauren's book I'm excited about. I'm excited about producing that series for Serena Bowen, which I'll talk more about later in the year. Um,
Yeah. Do you have a
uh,
producing name, or are you just doing it under your
I don't know.
name?
I was thinking because I'm like, what do you think it should be?
We'll talk about that off.
I was
off.
thinking maybe it should just be like Wilder Audio.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. We'll discuss. I was just intrigued because I've had to come up with a name, and I had
What's yours? Do
It's
you want to
still in
say?
production. It's no, it's like East House, but I don't know whether to do
Okay.
audio or productions. So I'm kind of, and it's still not, and to have a tagline. So I'm still kind of in the. By the time
What
this comes out,
taglines?
I'll have had to decide. I don't know,
What taglines are
bringing
you thinking
stories to
about?
life or whatever. You kind of, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if I want that even, or if I don't, or
books
people
for
kind
your ears. Yeah.
of listen up. Um, that might be a bit aggressive. Um,
Hey, assholes. Yeah. Want some audiobooks?
so we'll see. So yeah. So okay. So and that's for any authors listening. You can always approach Emma or whatever name she's going to do under for
Yeah.
producing. So that's always great.
Yeah. And I'm trying to keep it because it's only me. So like
Yes.
with you, like it needs to be kind of like a boutique thing where it's small enough that
Hmm.
I can manage it all. So I feel like
But you'll be
I'm
diving
really,
into this series coming. It's a whole host of books.
yeah, it's like 10.
Oh wow. Okay.
And yeah, I think they're all gonna, yeah, I'll tell you more later, but it's really
Okay.
exciting and I'm really excited about it.
All right. That's on the cards. Anyone listening?
Okay.
Um,
Other stuff, I don't know. I
well,
also never know what's been announced and I don't want to get in trouble.
I know.
You know?
Yeah, I normally have to make a list, and then Viv helps me with that. So I don't worry. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. People will
Okay.
find out, and the people like the Shaniacs are great at throwing it out there and telling
Yes,
everybody what's going on. So,
definitely.
but I will say we have another Anna Durand coming up next beginning of
Yay.
next year. Actually, I think aren't we? We're in March. Is it March? We're going to
Yeah.
record
I
that.
think I
So it's a
think you
ways
said
off.
yeah. I
So
put I didn't know the title yet when I put it on my calendar, so I wrote something something kilt.
yeah. It's not, I think actually I think it's been announced already, and
It
I
has. I
think
just
it might be
forget it.
devastating in a kilt, because I think that's the one. So you can see if I'm right, but that's the one we'll be doing together next year. Uh,
Yay. Do you know what it's about?
I don't
I,
yet, no. I just knew it's a female lead and,
well, good, because
a
that's my
Scottish bloke.
wheelhouse.
That's your
Female lead.
wheelhouse.
Yeah,
A
that's
female American lead, and a Scottish bloke, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So more on
awesome.
that. So yeah, unless there's anything else you want to add in or sign off with, we'll
Mm,
close this.
oh, the one answer on that Twitter question that I did see was someone was like, "What's a classic that she would like to narrate?"
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to bring it back to that time that I like 'cause, there aren't any. I wanna do British ones, and I can't because they're not for me. But
Hmm.
the one that I would wanna do is the series that I, like, drunk texted you about to be like, "Why aren't you doing this?" Like, it was this is my favorite series, and it was just released, and it should have been you. The Lord Peter Wimsey Mysteries by Dorothy Sayers. That's what
Okay.
I would like. There's one called Gaudy Night that is from the heroine's perspective, and it's so good, and that's what I would like to do in a fantasy where I got to narrate British books, which is not appropriate or happening. But I still think you should narrate the Lord Peter Wimsey books.
Okay.
So,
I know you.
hey,
Yeah, you did.
world.
So
Yeah.
hey, we'll see. We'll see, and maybe you will at some point. Your accents are so good. I know American girls who
Mm,
do first person British,
yeah, but it's
pulling
not,
it
I
off.
don't know.
We'll see.
Maybe
We'll
someday,
see.
but it's probably never going to be as good as the real deal. You know?
It will be. We're not going to end on a bum note.
I'll never be good enough. Anyway, thanks for having me.
You've been a wonderful guest. I think we've chatted for an hour and a
Long
half, which is
time.
crazy. Yes, so
Wow,
I am
yeah.
going to wrap this up.
Okey-doke.
But thank you for being with me and being the phenomenal, world famous, international, whatever, right? The superlatives I used earlier. And I will just say, as I close this out for Viv, is that we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana Enchantress of Books newsletter. And also, don't forget you can submit your this and that, or this or that questions for me. So again, thanks, Emma, for joining me.
Thank you.
And goodbye. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast now has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive early access to podcast episodes, exclusive content with our guests, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audioboooklovin. We thank you for your support.
A heartfelt thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. Special thanks to Susie Vanderham, Michelle Sutton, Jing Kemp, Jen Franklin, Brittany Cottingham, Kimberly Reed, Leanne Schwartz, Christine Cox, Christy Reitz, Jennifer Graham, Cindy Pittman, Mendy Summer, Jenny Johnson, Jesse Stafford, Chrissy Font, Rhonda Pezzarello, Evelyn Clarisi, Michelle DaCosta, Emily Dye, Michelle Bestard, Farah Blair, Candice Platel, Carol Liebner, Bethany Crane, and Teresa Martin.
Thank you for joining us on Shane East Meets, an Audiobook Lovin Podcast special series brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more info about today's episode or the Audiobook Lovin Series, visit vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. And please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to the podcast if, and I really hope you did, you enjoyed today's episode.